You got yours, Tim?
We ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, I'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting of September 20th. Can we have a roll call?
Chair Hutt,
Here.
Vice Chair Dennison,
Here.
Commissioners Catalano,
Here.
Desai,
Here.
Friarman Hunt, Pevsner, and Spears.
Present.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries unanimously. Next is approval of the minutes of the meeting of July 19th. Did anyone have any comments or corrections?
No exceptions.
Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Also move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that will carry unanimously as well. Next, run to audience comments. Doesn't look like there's anybody in the audience, but if anybody wants to run down, okay. Seeing none, we will move to our public hearing. Discretionary demolition permit 1706, design review permit 1704, and second unit permit 1804. Do we have a staff report?
We have a staff report that'll be delivered by our Assistant Planner, Claire Lynn. And we do have a PowerPoint presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioner. Planning Commission will be reviewing a discretionary demolition permit, design review permit, and a second unit permit for the property located at 62 East Carter. That is continued from the July 19th meeting. Applicant has returned with a revised plan that maintains the same objective to preserve all existing structures and protected trees on site, and also addresses Commission's concern. Applicant understands that the existing structures are eligible for designation as a local historic landmark and has obtained report from structural engineer on existing foundation and structure. Applicant is aware that the rehabilitation work using the state historic building code will be extensive and costly. Exterior of the siding of the Wayland Studio has been revised to be restored to natural wood color. Applicant has also taken the recommendations and made revisions to the site. Swimming pool is eliminated between the studio and the proposed residence, and the unused driveway approach will be replaced with curb and gutter. Applicant also provided topographic site plan that shows the slope of the site and the building footprint. Landscape plan is also revised to include native and drought-tolerant species, and ground cover under the drip line of the protected trees are removed. Existing oak and sycamore are protected under tree ordinance with general maintenance provided. Permeable pavers will be incorporated in driveway surface, and utility will be placed underground, which is also included in the conditions of approval. Applicant has also returned with new design for the single-family residence. Building footprint has been modified to be coherent to the shape of the lot, and aligning to the frontage along Carter Avenue. The proposed architectural style has changed to mid-century modern with metal shed roof system that slopes upwards towards the mountain. Applicant also studied the east elevation in order to be more animated with the front facade. They have designed a cantilever deck as a main entrance on the Carter Avenue with the emphasis on material change to a cedar wood siding. Applicant has worked on the solid void proportion on the fenestration system that maximizes the natural light source from the north. South elevation has also been modified with high clear story windows and hedge will be planted along the south property line to address privacy issue. Orientation of the garage is placed at an angle following the shape of the lot, minimize visual impact from the street view. And also a connecting walkway wraps around the oak, leading to the trellis patio. And the open trellis patio is sloped to have the same pitch as the shed roof. And also applicant has provided sections with grade profile. Proposed project remains in compliance with city zoning regulations. There is a 14 square feet increase due to the change of the layout. Here is the topographic site plan showing the slope of the site and revised footprints of the single-family residence. Revised footprint has developed to conform with the shape of the lot. The structure is on a raised foundation to minimize earthwork. The proposed residence is 48 feet 4 inches away from the Wayland studio, and also noted the pool and the driveway approach has been eliminated. Revised conceptual landscape plan that indicates native and drought-tolerant plant species. It shows the existing oak and sycamore are protected in place also by the entrance on the east side. All ground cover is removed under the drip line of the tree. Setbacks are conforming and greater than required. The revised plan shows that the structure is set back 32 feet 8 inches from the front east property line and 28 feet 8 inches from the north property line. Proposed floor plan of the main residence remains the same with 1 great room, 1 kitchen, 3 bedroom, and 2 bath. Garage is oriented at an angle following the shape of the lot. Revised north elevations showing from the Carter Avenue, viewing from the 2-story neighboring property to the north. The proposed project complements the shed roof designs of the historic structure that opens towards the mountain following the slope of the site and maximize the natural light source from the north with clear story windows and full height windows in the great room. And also the garage, the view of the garage is minimized. Revised east elevations showing the facade of the Wayland house in the studio from Carter Avenue. It also shows the street front facade with cantilever deck entrance that floats over the home CMU block to show the exposed aggregate that minimize the grade difference. Again, the project is on raised foundation to minimize impact to the site. It is lower on the south end. The grade meets the floor level on the north end. Revised south elevations shows the proposed main residence is set back 48 feet from the Wayland studio with a low profile design which minimizes the visual impact from the neighboring property to the south. Also, high windows preserve the privacy to the neighboring properties. Applicant also take advantage of the orientation and the south-facing slope roof, and they have proposed the structure to be solar ready. Revised west elevations showing the rear of the Wayland house and the studio from the 2-story property to the west. Also shows the shed roof system and the courtyard that connects to the patio. Applicant has provided sections that cut through the east-west showing the slope. And this is a section cutting through the north-south, also showing the grade profile. Additional sections that cut through the garage, the great room, the bedroom, and the master. Here are the samples of material that will be used for the project, including gray standing seam metal roof, exterior siding with an option of hardy board lap siding or the reveal cement panel siding, home or brushed CMU block, permeable pavers, glass garage door, cedar wood siding, and steel post and cable railing. Perspective renderings of the proposed project viewing from the street front entrance, showing the small oak and sycamore that frames the cantilever deck entrance. The great difference is minimized by having a different material, the home CMU block under the deck. This is showing the exterior with reveal fiber cement panel siding and the front entrance with cedar siding. Here are more perspective taking from the Carter Avenue and the central courtyard, and also the trellis, the open trellis patio. Here are the renderings with the option of the hardy board lap siding. Photo montage of the street view showing the neighboring property. And going further south, showing the houses set behind the mature trees and foliage in the surrounding neighborhood. Discretionary demolition permit finding and the design review permit finding have to be made in order to approve the project. These findings are in the packet for Planning Commission to make decision. Applicant was asked to address design review permit finding number 8, that the commission had concerns. On finding number 8.8, that revised design is thoughtful and innovative architecture responding to the specific site by preserving the existing structure and design around the existing oak and sycamore. Proposed structure is sensitive to the shape of the lot and making references to the Wayland Studio by having the shed-style roof system that correspond with to the slope. Finding number 8C, that applicant has provided list of plant species and incorporate native and drought-tolerant plants in the revised conceptual landscape plan. Number 8E, revised project is a compatible design and uses high-quality architectural details and material like the standing seam metal roof, clear story window, full height window with narrow frame, and large expanse of glass to bring in natural light. And finding number 8F, the proposed project will comply with the code that satisfy the sustainable building and landscaping standards. The property will be landscaped with drought-tolerant species, and the driveway material will be permeable paver. And the project is also taking advantage of its own orientation and make the new single-family residence solar ready. Alternative before Planning Commission this evening is to approve the project pursuant to Resolution 1807, or approve the project with modification, or deny the project, identifying the findings that the Commission feels cannot be made and the basis for rejecting those findings. or continue the project and provide staff and applicant with direction. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission take the following action pursuant to Planning Commission Resolution 1807, approve the application for a discretionary demolition permit 1706, design review permit 1704, and the second unit permit 1804, subject to the conditions of approval. Staff is recommending revise, besides the commemorative plaque that staff is recommending to be installed on the property, all utilities to be placed underground will be also included as part of the condition of approval. That concludes my presentations. I will answer any questions you might have for staff, and the applicant is here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, anyone have questions for staff?
No.
I have one. So the applicant has been very forthcoming, and the property will be sold. How will will there be, what are going to be the restrictions on things like fences or whatever to separate the inhabitants of I guess what I want to know is the Wayland Studio going to be part of the little house, or?
No, the Wayland Studio will just be a rec room. The existing house, Wayland House, would be the second unit.
Okay, so it will remain as one piece of property and cannot be subdivided or cut up in any way.
That's correct.
Okay. I think that's an important point to make.
And if you believe it's necessary, certainly that could be recorded as a covenant or a condition of approval.
Yeah, that might be helpful, because I could easily see somebody taking the property and cutting it in half and having the small unit and the studio be one unit and the big house being another. I don't think that would be too hard to do.
The access would be interesting.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question about some of the fences and walls. The existing CMU wall on the south property line is going to remain as is, right? It's not going to be changed or increased.
As indicated in the plan, it will remain the same.
Okay. And what about the property fence along Carter, the sort of metal ironwork one?
On the previous report, the applicant agreed to restore all the iron fence and place them back.
Okay.
Is that indicated anywhere?
Yeah, it is. It is on the plans. I was going to. Does that iron fence have some kind of historical or significant? Is anyone?
It really doesn't. It's just, it is an ornamental fence, and that was an early conversation, probably almost 2 years ago. There was conversation with staff regarding preserving or keeping or reusing portions of that fence.
They own a lot of it. There's a bunch of it on the property, so yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting fence.
And but I didn't know, and it says, it calls out in the plans to keep it, and I was wondering if there was a reason, there was some reason for that.
Well, it did enclose the Howard Wayland Sculpture Garden. You remember the sculpture garden that was there, right?
Yeah, but you know.
Well, it also provides some safety issues for deer. I mean, you can see that the tops of the fences were sort of doctored with things to make them unsharp, but I think that still continues as an issue, and I don't know if I think that's probably worth something for us to talk about later on.
Okay.
Okay. One other thing I noted is that the plan, the gross floor area for the thing for the project in total with all the buildings is 1 square foot short of the maximum. But that square footage does not include the trellis or the covered porch on the second unit. And the trellis, I understand, is not included because it's an open feature and we only include closed roofs. But it seems to me that the covered porch on the second unit should be included in the square footage, and that would, if it would bump us over by 180 something feet.
What's the rule about front porches? I thought they only didn't count if they were along the street frontage. Is that right?
In this case, if the new structure were not there, I would say that that front porch would be excluded from calculation. There's a bit of a gray area in terms of now we have a new primary structure that is blocking direct view of that existing residence. So that could be questioned as to whether or not it should be excluded from the floor area calculation, the porched area, because it's no longer visible from the street front.
It also, the porch has to be on the primary structure, which it was, but if this is a second, it's not. So it gets complicated. Okay, thank you.
And there are other remedies that could take place. One of them would be to omit the shed roof and just have an open trellis structure in that one little portion in front. And the other option would be to revisit the program of the primary structure, the new primary structure.
Part of the existing porch is a trellis. When you look at it on the right-hand side, only the left-hand side is covered, but the plans call for a covered porch.
Was that just an issue of the language on the?
No, it's a matter of the square feet that's under roof.
Yeah, I know. When you said it just called for the covered porch, and is the the intention of the language clear enough on the drawings? Is all I was asking.
Well, I think
Well, it's not included in the square footage, so.
right, and if it's covered, technically it should be, unless it's the front facing on the primary structure, which technically it was,
Anymore.
but now it's not. So I guess we live in sort of a gray area. Also, under the second unit ordinance, there's a different definition of floor area that doesn't include covered porches. So,
No.
so we've got some mess there.
But backing up from that, okay, if it goes over substantially, what does it change, other than the numbers? That
well, I think
they're still going to have to comply with because it's over the threshold.
well, if it's over the threshold, then they'd have to reduce floor area somewhere to get under the threshold. There's two issues, right? One is the objective criterion, and then the other is whether we think it impacts the findings. So I guess that's something else we can chew on. But it probably makes sense for us to discuss with the applicant and also to decide if we think that should be counted in the square footage, so the applicant can have proper direction, because it's not. I don't think it's fair to the applicant at all if we sort of leave them in limbo as we move along through the project. So, okay, no other questions of staff? Would the applicant like to address the commission?
So, the patio cover on the front of the Whalen house, that's always been open. Is it showing it closed? Like a cover?
It says enclosed roof.
Is that where you're getting the extra square
It says enclosed
footage?
roofed front porch, which makes it sound like it's enclosed with a roof.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
it's-
That's what it says on the
unfortunately,
plans.
It's not. It's a trellis. It's an opened roof. That won't be closed.
On P2.
Okay.
It's that way now.
Okay.
Okay.
So that keeps it in the square footage?
Yeah.
Okay, and as far as the fence goes, we were told to keep the fence.
Do you want the fence?
Not necessarily. I've heard different stories on a fence. I mean, Whalen being the creative person he is, but I've heard stories that the fence literally came from the studios, because a bunch of people from the studios used to hang out there with Whalen. But then I believe if you look in the historical photos, that because we did a historical thing on it, and I saw the fence in there. So I'm not so sure if it came from the studios or not. But we saved it in case you want us to put it back.
I think it's a creep.
It is
I
a
don't
dangerous
think
fence, though.
Very,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
it's important.
don't you have some laws about bear and
Deer.
deer and
Yes.
types of fences?
Yeah, so if you do put it back, you have to cover all of the sharp parts on the top.
Oh, it's
Plus, I think it has to be only no more than 42 or something, right?
Right.
Because it's on a front,
Yeah.
primary street.
Well, but I mean, that's if it's new. If it's existing grandfather non-conforming.
there's lots of new.
They've already
fences out
taken
there.
it out, they're putting it back.
Well, they've taken part of it out. Half of it's still there.
I would just as soon see it.
Yeah,
It doesn't add anything, and if anything, it just adds more trouble.
and it almost looks like it was salvaged from somewhere else. It doesn't, I'm not sure it does your project any favors. So I don't know, but I don't know if it has historical significance or if it was designed by the, artist or whatever, so
It
but,
doesn't appear that it's been put in with any kind of certain distances, certain heights,
Yeah.
because the distances are different. There's nothing symmetrical about it. But we kept it because we were told to. But
Well, you're kind of peeping at me, but I got to tell you that I just happen to like it personally, which is a funky object, and my personal likes aren't supposed to really affect the record here seriously. Okay, so just take it like that. Yeah, I like it.
okay.
Big deal.
I mean,
I'm not encouraging anybody to go in the direction of telling them to retain it.
it is covered.
I don't
I
know.
mean, in a funny way, we talked, one of the questions we had was that side property fence, which is low, the block, it's not gonna go any higher. And I know the applicant's proposing some hedging there.
Right.
To kind of create this, I mean, that sort of fence would be more useful there, to keep kind of the hedging in place and
Yeah.
create, I mean, if you wanted to repurpose it, I wouldn't put it back in the front.
No, that's the only, yeah, it doesn't help the project from the front.
But anyway, that's not.
That's just my opinion.
Well, before we launch into any other questions,
Yeah.
do you have a presentation to make, or are you just here to answer questions?
No, I'm just here to just get your blessings. It's been a process.
Yes.
Right?
I just have a question about, one of the things I asked for, which we didn't get, was a section that went across this house and across the house to the south of it, to kind of see how much higher than that house, the existing house to the south, this one is going to be, because it's lifted up, and it was a little hard for me to imagine that, how high this one's gonna look compared to the one that's down there, below the wall.
I went to that house
I went there
today,
today, too, yeah.
but they're not home. I talked to them on their doorbell. They're next,
Uh-huh,
and they're renters,
that's what I thought.
and they're out of town, but I talked with them, and they feel that they shouldn't weigh in on
Well,
it because
because
they
they're
don't own the
neighbors.
property.
Yeah, I mean, it looked to me like there's actually 2 units on that lot.
Yeah, there's
There's one above the garage,
yeah.
Right.
Yes.
and there's one that's the main one, and the one above, I was looking at the one above the garage, because that one currently kind of has a view up to the mountains through its window.
Well, if you look at like on P7, I mean, the house isn't in there, but that's kind of a section.
The rendering on P16,
You,
is
s-
a good all the way wrap around to show them.
you can see the height differential.
I mean, you can see the house, but you can't see the house, and, I mean, you can see where the wall is, but.
Basically, that wall comes
and then
up.
this one, it's way back there, and it's hard to tell how far back that is and compared, so.
Yeah, but that's, I mean, going there. This,
I was there today.
It's a side yard
At it, yeah.
of that property, and basically that CMU wall comes up to just under almost their roof pitch, maybe a foot below. So all their windows there are kind of basically looking at the wall.
Mhm.
But from the applicant's property, you can see
Look down
down
in,
into
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, I think the hedging would totally,
No, the hedge
Take care
that
of
they
that.
prescribed grows 10 to 20 feet tall. so
yeah,
that's-
I don't, I
Yeah.
think,
Other questions? Gene?
yeah, I had a couple
Go ahead.
of questions. So in the presentation, it showed sort of two options for the siding on Carter. You know, in one instance, it showed sort of the reveal panel, large scale panel hardy, and then it showed just your clapboard sort of hardy. Did you have a preference, or was there a reason you had two options?
I think that two options were just to show you folks.
Okay.
But basically, I like the hardy board. I like it kind of matching the Wayland house.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Opposed to stucco, or, you know, there's different types of sidings, you know, but that one hardy board is probably the best option. It's, you know, very durable, and I do a lot of it.
yeah.
But
So-
your goal on that was to have input from us to choose one or the other? You don't want to like mix them together or
Well,
anything?
just to show you both of them.
Okay.
It'd be one or the other.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I have some thoughts on that, but maybe if there's other questions.
Well, probably when it comes back to us, we can kick it around.
Yeah.
Are you planning on having the clear story windows with the ability to open? Or are they going to be fixed windows?
They're pretty much going to be fixed windows. We might go like every other one,
That'd be nice if you don't like.
but they open up with a pole.
You'll need a
Yeah.
rod to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just thinking,
Which
if
is
I
a-
lived in that house, I wouldn't want to be opening up those
Yeah,
windows. and let
vent
the
a lot
hot
of
air
heat,
out.
yeah.
It
No,
would
I
be a
don't
great
think
way
we'd
to
open them
ventilate.
all up. Would probably,
Not all,
you
not-
could do
but
the
at
same
least-
design and open up like every other one.
Yeah. I
That's
think
great
it-
ventilation.
I think it would be great ventilation to let the hot air rise out of there, because if you're like me and don't like to run the AC,
No, I'm sure there's definitely going to be a couple that will open.
yeah, because I think that would be a way big benefit.
Especially with the heat that rises in
Yeah, yeah.
California.
Because there was no indication, maybe I hadn't really thought about it, but I think it would be useful use of those.
And also, we have no plans of ever subdividing that. I think you have rules and restrictions here that doesn't even allow us to do that. It's more like a main house with a granny flat type thing.
Yeah.
I just want to remark that I think you had said a few minutes ago something about the windows on the south elevation. There was some conversation about the windows on the south elevation overlooking the
Yeah, they're all clear
adjoining
stories.
property. Yeah, they're all very, very high windows.
So I think there's only four, there are two on either end,
Yeah, there's two pair at
They are high up.
and they're very high.
They're
They're
all-
almost at the ridge.
Yeah.
I mean, at the,
You'd really have to be going out of your
Yeah,
way to,
yeah. Yeah, I
get up. It's not a big deal.
I have a few questions. The first is on the trellis, just to the west of the great room. In looking at the different renderings, sometimes it looks sort of closed, but the intent is to have it open, right?
Correct.
And why did you put the cross members going parallel with the house as opposed to parallel with the standing seam roof? When I looked at it, I just thought you would want to run those the same as the standing seam roof. And so I'm just wondering, what was the design thought on that, or was it just plugged in?
A lot of it has to do with the sun. Which direction do they?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I put them.
You want to come down to the microphone so we can get on the record?
Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I believe I ran them the same way as the roof.
The standing seam.
Yeah.
Well, on the
So they're running parallel to the face of the west elevation.
Well, I mean, there's a structural reason too, because
Yes, there's also
this is a shorter distance, so he can span. Like if you run it the long way, which is with the seams,
right.
at some point down the middle, which isn't a big deal, he'd have to put a member to split those, because it'd be too long for them to kind of stay
Right.
wedged in there. But is it steel or wood?
It'll be wood.
All the infill and the frame, it's all wood.
It's all
Yeah.
wood.
Yeah, so that's even.
But
I
I
don't
don't. But it's a pretty good. Yeah, it's all just wood trellis.
Yeah, so no, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. It isn't running parallel.
No, it's not.
No, you know, when it runs.
Yeah, it's running perpendicular.
Okay. I mean, it just seemed, when I looked at it, it struck me as a little odd. Are there thoughts, I didn't see this on the conceptual design plan, landscape plan, but are there thoughts to put any sort of vining stuff in there to go up and cover, or is that you just want to have open?
Well, perhaps when we develop the plan a little more.
Okay.
It's sort of a personal preference thing of like whoever's there, if they want to put grapevines on it to kind of close it in, but that's not a good idea to do to wood
Yeah.
because it just holds moisture, it deteriorates faster.
Well, that's one of the questions. I mean, if you know you're going to go down that way, you might do it out of steel. So it really sort of, you know, if that's a part of the program or not. The other question I had is on the southeast part of the house. You can see from one of the cross sections of, I think, bedroom 2, you're almost 7 feet above the ground, and I was wondering if you didn't think about just putting in a room under there, because you wouldn't need much excavation at all. It wouldn't cause a lot of, you know, grading, and you could put storage, mechanical, and in a lot of ways, the sort of grounding the mass might look better, and you know, you wouldn't even have to have a stairway come down from the actual living quarters. You could just have it accessed from outside, and that semi-subterranean wouldn't count as floor area, wouldn't cause you any problems on the approvals, but it would seem to make the project a lot more, the utility of living in the house a lot better.
No, that's a great, I mean, we've already pretty much sort of kind of going that direction because that's not part of the overall footprint. If we put a basement in, isn't that true?
Yeah.
So that for sure there will be some sort of a basement there. You know, I mean, we have to access it from the outside somewhere, but it'll probably be on the south wall. But that's a great place for your gardening. There's
Right.
HVAC, things like that, because
Yeah.
you have to do all the ducting from somewhere,
Right.
and you don't have a lot of ceilings with the roof you put on.
Also, it wasn't
incorporate some
HVAC
of
would
that
have to
too.
be underneath, yeah.
right. It wasn't clear to me with the height of the CMU wall, where if you're from the neighbor from the south and you looked, there wouldn't be parts where it would look like the house was just floating, because the wall wasn't high enough to cover, and that struck me as that if that does occur, that would look a little weird. And that's why if you grounded that corner, you know, with you actually put in basement kind of thing, it would look.
You're saying about like filling in where the entry is up to that corner?
Well, I'm just saying, basically, if you took sort of the
Like if you look at P10, you're seeing that lower box rendering, which is the entry, the lower left.
We can do it either way.
Are you
Yeah,
saying filling that in?
yeah, perhaps. I mean, it looks to me it's more evident on the cross section if you look at. Let me see what one that was.
Yeah, I mean, from a design perspective, I think you've got something working here with that cantilevered sort of entry. Like, to start filling that in and bringing that CME block forward.
No, I wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do that.
No.
I think you've got enough space where it is to get usable square footage underneath there.
Yeah, but we're probably gonna put like our air conditioners,
Yeah,
water heaters.
gardening shed and
Yeah.
mechanical room.
Yeah.
I like the cantilevered,
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it
I think
makes
I
it
like
feel
it.
lighter.
yeah.
Yeah, we changed that from the original.
I noticed you changed a lot of things.
Yeah, so
Really
let
good,
it
though.
let it
It looks
float.
really good.
We were listening.
No, you were. I was gonna save my kudos
Yeah.
during my speech, but
Well, I'm not funny, but that's.
Yeah, definitely let it float, John. It's okay.
On the lower left.
Okay.
yeah,
Um.
P9.
Yeah. Says there's 5'10" underneath there.
And that's, I mean, and you could grade that a little bit down
Yeah.
to level it.
You're
You'd
digging
have
there
almost
anyway.
6
You're moving
feet
dirt
there.
anyway, so that's the time to do it.
Yeah,
you'd have
yeah.
almost 6
That's
feet.
where I'm talking
Have
about.
you been underneath the Wayland house? Because that's exactly
Yeah.
what's down there.
Yes,
Yeah.
I looked
Yeah.
under there today.
Yeah, but you've got an existing house there. You're not going to put a bulldozer underneath it, right? I guess that would be handwork. This is something that could be readily accomplished.
For sure
so.
it'll be used.
The other thing is you've got the roof to be solar ready. Why not just put the panels in? It would make it a lot easier for us to make finding 8F about the sustainability.
I guess
It's a cost thing. It's a cost thing.
But I mean, doesn't it help the resale? It just seems like I don't know. It seems
Not
like
as much as you think.
No.
When you say solar ready, will there be, you're running conduit up through
Yeah.
there, or just that you have a place?
Part of the
You have a place and it's
Yes.
structurally.
What they should do, what we're required to do when we do anything in the LA City is, when it's solar ready, you've got at the meter, you've got your inverter, and you've got the conduit going up to the roof, and you've got the spot sighted, and it's basically,
All
when
they're
you
gonna
get the
have to do is
panels
throw 'em
on,
down.
you're feeding to the thing. So all the hardware is there.
Okay, and the conduit is inside the building as opposed to running up the exterior?
Right.
It can go either way, but yeah, I mean, it's got to find its way to the meter.
Right.
You know?
You don't
And
have you have no vents. In other words, it's a clear space that doesn't need to be
Yeah.
modified.
Structurally speaking, what the building official here has said to me is that if it structurally is in compliance with for a roof and with the live load requirement that is normally placed on a roof, which is about the equivalent of a worker walking on it, that it's about the same weight as the solar panels, and nobody's going to be walking on the solar panels. So he kind of takes it as a wash,
But-
right? So this isn't really a big deal that it's structurally
No, I'm
To
okay.
not-
your point, you're more than halfway there, because they're also putting a metal roof, standing seam.
Yeah.
That's the easiest roof to clip your bar to, and then have your array on there, like you're close.
Well,
But
the
there's a
issue
cost.
is,
So
the issue is, for one, for your perspective, you have a turnkey thing, it's already done. For our perspective, in making finding 8F, if there's solar panels that you're putting in, we know there's going to be solar panels. If it's solar ready, maybe there's going to be panels, maybe there's not. So, it's just, it's a less sustainable design. It could be as sustainable, but it might not be. So, that's what it is now. And finally, I had a question on the east facade. I think the new east facade is just miles better. I really like this.
Thank you.
And I like the clear story windows. I like the look of the roof. But you do get a bit of an area that's sort of blank. And I'm wondering if there was thought of continuing the sort of railing. I really like the wire railing around the deck, and sort of continuing that along a little bit more. Either as a continuation of the deck, or having some sort of lattice work that you could have, like sort of vines or train plants on, or something like that, to continue that design element over a little more.
Is the sycamore too close to do
The
a
sycamore
deck?
is in the way, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But the look of the railing could be continued on just slightly out from the house to
Right,
continue
you
down
could-
to break up that big massing at that one face.
It's okay.
Yeah, if you remember that little flat roof area that I have up there, was because I originally tried to push that
Mhm.
front porch out towards the garage. And so that's how that roof came out. And then I realized that the sycamore was there. And so, but I liked the roof, so I left the roof.
Right. The other thing you might consider is if continuing that design element is blocked by the sycamore, that past the sycamore as you go north, maybe you on your design plan, your landscape plan, you have some sort of a more vertical element, because you've got a lot of ground cover in front there, and maybe a vertical kind of shrub would help break that up.
That's easy to do, yeah.
Another tree.
Another tree.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
So I'm going to phrase the question to the designer. you had two options for the siding, the large panel hardy and then the clapboard or the lap siding. Thought process on either one?
So when the lap siding, I mean, typically when I do lap siding, you need to have trim, and I thought putting trim on this design would basically ruin it because it would just get, it's just too clean. And so I guess the carpenter could try to miter the corners, but yeah, I just thought it would be a little challenging.
So
We've been doing a lot of that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a couple schools of thought, like, and it was in the presentation. So this definitely has gone from sort of a, I don't know what before, what it was more of a bungalow or kind of a ranch, you know, but to a mid-century, you know. And I applaud you for kind of where you've taken it from our feedback and where it is now. I think it's actually could be a really beautiful house. But if you're going to stay in that vernacular of a mid-century sort of design, you know, these large panels can work, but you're not breaking the scale down. Like you're actually accentuating the scale, right? Because those panels are probably 2 by 4 or something like that.
They're 4 by 8.
4 by 8. Okay, so it's like sheets of plywood, basically.
Right.
If you were to do siding fitting for this style, I think you need to find something that's like shiplapped or tied together so it's all flat and you get sort of a line, a batten. It's all, the lap siding doesn't really work with a true mid-century style, which you're 90% there, you know, as far as the form of the house. But it's going to be in those details where if you go with like the 8-inch siding, you should really figure out how to do a T&G where they lap, you know, and so it's all flush. I think that's going to give you that scale, the horizontal lines, it'll carry, and it'll break that facade, especially on the east side. I think that's where you've got kind of this long expansive surface, you know, with these high windows. You might want to think about that. And in this style, a lot of siding was ran vertical too. You know, sort of the board and batten, you know, or just panels.
That's how the studio is.
That's how the studio is, yeah.
But you can run T111 horizontal too.
T111 is quintessential
Oh, no.
mid-century, but which
Well, it comes smooth.
We have a finding for quality materials.
but
I think firewood.
You're trying to shake up the commission by mentioning that material,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
No, we're not buying it, okay?
But you can mimic the same thing with 12-inch panels, you know, that are flush and run vertical. I mean, there's look into that is what I'm saying. I don't think that the large sheeted 4 by 8. I know it's the hardy with the reveal line, but it's gonna. I don't think it'll be quite make it feel commercial, but it's the scale is wrong. I think for what you're trying to do, you want to elongate this and break that scale down.
There's a masonite. There's you know, I've been doing a lot of ceilings in T&G, you know, outdoor patios.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good material.
Yeah, so look at that, you know, and you could do an 8 or 12-inch profile. I would go in that direction rather than the larger sheets of pre-finished. I know it's pre-finished panels. And the other nitpicky thing to kind of tie it in the design, if you're going to do that, I like that white burnished block. I think it looks beautiful, but you may want to consider stacking it and not staggering it. That's like fits with that style. Like
True.
anytime you see block used, and usually it's half height block too, but you don't need to do that because it's going to cost you way more. You spend twice as much on the material. But if you went with a regular block, think about stacking it rather than staggering it. It's just
Right,
the
yeah.
detail that
Have a
fits.
brick pattern, you just stack it straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
With that burnished block, and it'll look beautiful, and it's fitting with the style of house you're creating. So. But anyway, that's.
I want to say something and basically agreeing with a comment that one of you made a few minutes ago, and that is the issue of trim that would be required for a particular type of siding. The mid-century modern, I think you know this, that the mid-century modern style was pretty much devoid of trim. In other words, if you look at a traditional house with trim on the corners, trim here, trim there, it's very, very different. And modernism really attempted to get rid of that stuff. So it's kind of like, I would like to suggest, and I don't know if we want to work this into a finding or not, but I think if you wound up with a carpenter who just started doing traditional trim while this building was being sheathed, it would be really, really ruinous to it.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if we can make a condition out of that or not.
Well, I think we're moving far into discussion and consideration, and we should be in the questioning phase. So if we have any more questions of the applicant, let's bring them out. Otherwise, we can let the applicant sit down, and we can bring it back for our discussion. Nothing? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's go with
May I continue?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, all right.
We struck all that from the record tonight.
Oh, damn, I have to go
Don't make
back
him
in.
say it again.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, I would truly like to see that any, that all of those details be considered, and that anything that really is a trim board is not a topically applied thing, but it's it's scarfed in flush. That or it just doesn't exist. Where some of these things were used in mid-century modern, if it wasn't scarfed in flat, then the materials themselves were just mitered perfectly at the corners. And if we are going to go into the territory of working with the applicant on the what the surface treatment is, as it affects the appearance, then this kind of detail is extremely important to that. Otherwise, we could direct them, not say anything else about it, and it could still get ruined.
Right. Tom? Yeah.
I think that what they brought back was a far cry from the first time that it came forward, and that I appreciate that they have listened to the commission and worked towards those goals.
Jan?
Yeah, I looked at this and I was like, yeah. We don't often get people designing buildings who listen as well as you did. Thank you. I think that the issue I already mentioned about the height compared to the building to the south, because it's raised up on that side on account of the slope, is the one thing that I noticed, because it's going to be quite high off the ground there. However, the ceiling height isn't that big. It's not that high in this house like we sometimes get. And so you have minimized it in that way, that you haven't made these hugely high ceilings all the way across, which sometimes we see in one-story buildings nowadays. I really like the variation in the roof. I think that just looks cool. And I think the way it mirrors the studio is really nice. I really appreciated that, because I think that studio's really fun. I think it's a nice thing, and it has a sensitivity to that particular location and the historical nature of the spot, and I think to bow to that was a really nice way to go. In terms of the siding, I would prefer something flat rather than the lap kind. I think it goes way better with this style of building. And the architects and stuff have a better sense of exactly the material, but I think the other one makes it look kind of like a bow to something more traditional, and it takes away from the modern nature, which is the heart of this building that you've offered to us. So I really I like that. And the other thing I said about making sure that some of those clear story windows are open, I think would be helpful to whoever lives in this house.
Makes it easier for the sustainability findings as
Yeah,
well.
really,
Yes,
it does. You
it
want to
does.
be able to have windows that open. I just think windows that open are a great thing. So, because I know that the master bedroom has sliding doors, does it?
Yes.
Yeah. And do the windows on that side also open? I mean, I think that would be nice if they did. Because I have a sliding door in my master bedroom, and when you want to leave it open at night, it's not very convenient for ventilation. So you just want a window worth of.
Especially when you're right next to the wilderness and you might have bears
Yeah,
come and
you
visit you.
could
yeah.
have bears, and I have friends who live like that, and they had to put up like a metal screen door thing to keep the bears from coming in through the open sliders. So, opening windows in the master bedroom would be a consideration as far as I'm concerned. But overall, I think it's really nice. I'm really happy you did away with the pool, because that's a sustainability thing in a big way to us in Sierra Madre. And I think to kind of maximize the attraction of the big oak tree in the middle instead is a lot nicer design in terms of sensitivity to the local environment. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I'd like to start by commending the applicant, because you listened and took notes and you followed through, and you know, it's gonna keep a lot of emotional problems out of this project. We've had other applicants who have not been quite as sensitive as you are, and unfortunately we all suffer through many and many revisions, and it's very taxing, so good for you. On my list, the first thing was that fence. I know you call out for the existing fence, and quite honestly, I don't see anything about that fence that is either historic or aesthetically appropriate. And I think with your design, I think you should have a shot at putting a fence up there that complements the house. The other thing,
no fence across
or
the
no
front
fence.
of the house.
Uh,
Not really a need for a fence across the front of the house. I think I'd rather see it open to the street,
Yes.
personally.
The other thing was the basement equipment room. I think that will be an excellent use of that space, and it'll make the house much more practical. On the siding, I'm not in favor of any kind of shiplap. I'm not in favor of any kind of trim, so I will defer to our architects on the commission that I do believe that it should have a horizontal pole to it, because I think that's what your project looks like, and that's what makes the project look good. And I'm grateful for the two different renderings, because I can flip back and forth and go, yeah, you know what, I do prefer the horizontal lines more than I do the big squares. Are I like your point about being more industrial, and I'm not sure that that's quite what you want. I think the project would probably be helpful if you put one more tree on the east side to break up that big massing that's to the right of the front door. I think that will hide a lot of stuff. I also think that this project is very dependent upon the planting across the concrete wall at the back. I think that your neighbors will very much appreciate you taking out whatever that mess is that's growing there now and putting in something that will screen everything and give them the privacy and you the privacy that you want. I'm glad the pool is gone. I think that was going to be a bridge too far, and I'm going to be interested to see how the rainwater barrels or whatever that works for you, because I think that's something that the city's going to see a lot more of, and how that works will be. I'm glad you have it. Let's see how that. I'm just curious as to, okay, water in, water out. How's it going to do? What kind of impact is it going to have? And I would tend to agree that if you're solar panel ready and you have, now's the time to put in the solar panels, because you're doing it when you're building the place, and it's not gonna have some guy mess up the roof because they're walking on it. You know, you've got it in there, and you're running the wires inside the walls instead of, you know, up the outside and making it look ugly. So, and if you're undergrounding utilities, you're 9/10 of the way there anyway. So, I think that I would be pleased to see solar panels on it. So, that's all my list.
I'd just like to say one other thing, which I remembered. I really like the way the garage got turned.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you were very clever with that.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Well, I'm going to echo, go you.
May I
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
one more thing here? Two more things. One is
Go for three.
we're all right. I want to thank the applicant. We're talking like you guys were great because you listened to us. Okay, this whole thing is drawn with a really good hand, and that's
Joe.
your hand.
Into the microphone, though.
Yeah, I was saying that it's drawn with a really good hand. You know, we can't pat ourselves on the back too much about this because it's delineated well, it's thought out well.
They listen, and it's very.
And I'm thankful. I'm thankful for good designers coming into town. I want to support the idea of using the underfloor space as part of for the HVAC. And a reason for that is that you've got these beautiful clear stories. One of the sustainability measures in here is that those clear stories and the other large windows can definitely be used to conduct a lot of daylight into the spaces. Good daylighting is definitely a sustainability measure, and you would not want to begin to mess up the smooth flow of the ceiling and the smooth flow of the daylight in by boxing in ducts up high. That would be totally contrary to to what we have here.
Right. It's a
So-
lot like the house we just put on the historic list, where they had the underfloor plenums and ducting.
They just kept it really clean.
Yeah, yeah.
You can ruin things. You can ruin things otherwise, and that's it. And I just hope that we can work something into the conditions so that any trim will be flush and won't be standing proud as in a traditional house. And I want to thank the applicants.
Go ahead.
I'm going to echo a lot of the same sentiments, but some specifics. I think you did a great job. So hats off to you for, one, listening to some of our feedback and kind of sifting through that. And when I look at your redesign, this is the house that wants to be on that site. That's basically, what it boils down to. When you look at it, it fits. And you ran with the style and sort of made your maneuvers to fit that, and I think you've done a deft job of working with the site, working with the oak, and I think the turn of the garage, all those things. You answered all the questions we had. Some of the nitpicky things, as a designer in my head, I always go, if I'm 90% there and I've got a style that I'm running with, the devil's in the details, so how do you take it that last 10% and make sure you dial that in so it fits? And, my earlier comment on the block, take it for what it's worth, but that's something you should look at, stacking versus staggering. I think the siding, when we do houses like this where we know it's, going on the market, it's not for a specific client, we always play the high-low game. So, putting horizontal siding that's flush, there's a cost associated with it, and it's the level of detail and installation it's laborious, So you kind of pick, sometimes having the whole house wrapped in that is too much of a good thing, So you gotta kind of pick your battles here. And I one suggestion I have is think about a horizontal siding, and an 8, even you can go 12, something in that ballpark that's flush on this east face, wrapping around the garage and maybe coming back. You have two blocks. You have this block that's the garage block going north-south. That may want to get wrapped in this siding. And you may consider on the east-west block, you know, if you did that in a stucco, you know, a smooth troweled plaster, that would work well, because really that face is all about the windows. You have these really large openings that open onto the oak tree. There's not a lot of wall surface. It's a lot of windows, you know, and rightfully so. That whole box, and on the south side, which is sort of the side yard, you know, to put a bunch of really expensive wood siding, you know, it's a continuity of the material. I get it, but it's also like a huge cost, you know. And so that's where you pick, you know, it's hardly going to get seen. So you may consider plastering that, or a smooth trowel plaster, and then the sidings on that north-south element. I would say also really consider or think about spending the money for that trellis portion. It's basically a continuation of the roof, but I would highly suggest that those two 4x4 posts be out of steel. You're going to go in there and put those 4x4 wood posts in, you know, and it'll be sold and everything, and then that's the one element where it gets termite damage, or it's rotted or whatever. Like, if you make it, you get 4x4 tube steel, put that in, support it up there at the roof, and you'll never have to come back to that element ever. So I think spend the money to maybe consider making that piece out of steel, you know. Not the infill, the trellis part can be wood, but the structure supporting it, think about that out of steel. You'll never have to think about it again. So those are just my nitpicky comments. But overall, totally support the project. I think it's great. I think this is the house that wants to be there. So great job.
True.
Yeah, I'm going to echo comments of my fellow commissioners. I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I did look at the plans and I watched the meeting back. And I think you did a deft job of hearing the comments and responding to them, and not taking them down and just doing them of road. I mean, a lot of this was, go think about this issue, like the garage. It wasn't, go, you know, turn it this way. It doesn't work, go fix it, and you did. And that requires thought and design, and that's what you put into it. So I greatly appreciate that. I also really like the project narrative. That was very helpful in understanding the thought process, tying the project to our findings, and that's something, staff, we should have all our applicants do. We should greatly encourage them to get going with that. On the trellises and the covered porch, I would like to see more detail on how that's actually going to work. I do want to make sure that those open spaces remain open and look open. One of the issues we have is obviously the code requirement for the amount of square footage, but to me far more important is the finding that the mass isn't overpowering. And I think if you did have a trellis work that the pieces were very close together, or if, God forbid, somebody comes in and cribs, you know, and then you start to get a lot more heaviness. And so I'd really like to see that clarified on what's open and how it's going to look. And I think getting the cross members sort of farther apart so you have more of a feeling of openness would be good. On the siding, I like the panels better than the lap. And I don't think it's necessarily because they're big. I'm convinced from the other commissioners really the issue is the flush. So, you know, whether you shrink that down or whatever, and whether you want to convert some of the other parts to flush stucco, you know, that sounds appropriate as well. But it's really not the siding issue with trim that we want to see. The conceptual landscape plan, to me at this point, is still far too conceptual, and in some places inaccurate or inconsistent. There was discussion in the narrative about how there's no planting under the trees, the oaks, but I see stuff under the oaks. Also, you've got some things in the legend that list a symbol with a plant and it's not on the plan. And then there's some symbols on the plan that aren't in the legend. So this just, I mean, it's getting there. And I think there's also some possibility for a tree or shrub on the east facade to break up a little bit of that just north of the sycamore. Also, if you're going to plant 1 gallon rock roses, the symbol should be small, not the same size as an oak tree, because it sort of looks a little bit ridiculous. You know, I get that this is sort of the last bit that you do, and that's fine. But I just think it needs to be tied up and put in a bow. The idea of using some sort of basement, I would like to see. I think that will very much improve the utility of the house, probably help you sell. And I'd like to see how that's done. I don't really know the right thing. I'm not a big designer, so I'm not saying push it out or doing it. I just want to see what it looks like, and you should take advantage of that and plan for it now. I think it makes sense to put the solar panels in now. You're doing the whole thing. You might as well just finish it off. And that's all I got. So I think, you know, to me, this thing is almost all the way there. And I'd really like to see, what I would think is the best way to do this is, instead of trying to make conditions to try to get staff to wade through this, is I'd like to see it come back one more time. And, you know, y'all are free to disagree if you don't think so. But there's a few different elements on here that I'd really like to see how they're tied together and have the project get all the way from 90% to 100%. So that's where I'm at now.
I mean, I guess I would sort of mildly disagree, only because I think the applicant has shown good faith in sort of, from the last time we met to what it is here, and that's almost 2 months. I mean, we met in July, right? Here we are in September. I mean, I don't know their schedule, but I imagine they'd like to get going. You know, I don't know if they can come back in the next meeting and be ready. You know, I just think it's pushing it out for the landscaping portion. I think the other stuff could definitely be taken care of as terms of conditions. The basement, I mean, if you want to see that, it's basically, I'm sure what they're going to do, I could be wrong, but they're going to take as much of that space that's feasible underneath there to take it back. You know, if that section is anything close to correct, it's, I mean, you can take probably 20 feet, 30 feet back, you know, build a retaining structure.
But I mean, you wouldn't see it from,
yeah,
you wouldn't see it from outside. So to me, it's,
like, what do we want to see? I mean,
I don't care, you know. I mean, it doesn't count as square footage, right? And it wouldn't visually change the look of the building at all. So I don't feel like I need to see that. As long as it's within the structure that we have seen, I don't care what they do inside of there.
I mean, are we able to parse out, like, the landscape I totally get, like, there's just some discrepancies and it's probably half-baked. You know? Is there any way to
Well, doesn't this
see that and let the, I mean, because to me, they're two separate issues. The landscape is sort of the decoration on the cake, you know, but I think the cake's really good, you know, like it,
well, I don't want to change the cake. I just want to see the decorations all in place. I mean, do we have?
Me, if that holds them up another 2 or 3 months, like that's.
No, I don't. I think we're talking 2 weeks or till our next meeting.
But
Again,
it's also dependent on if they can
bring it back.
Bring it back.
So in terms of the landscape plan, generally this is to be very a conceptual landscape plan. When I first started here, we really didn't even see very much of that. So we're trying to push a little bit further more towards a complete landscape plan prepared by a landscape designer or landscape architect. Typically, we see that progression once we get into building plan check, and that's submitted at that point.
With all the WELO stuff.
Yes.
I mean, I think that, you know, the plants they have recommended as far as they've gone are nice, you know, drought-tolerant plants that are.
Yeah, I think the plant
they're
you're talking about for the hedge is a good one.
They're along the right, you know, rock roses are nice,
nice.
Davies are nice. They're nice plants, and I think that, and manzanitas are totally appropriate as well. So I just think that.
Yeah, but the manzanita is going to go under the oak tree. I don't understand that. is that where it's supposed to go? I mean, the whole thing was saying we're not going to put it under.
Wouldn't the fire department say something about the manzanita that close to the house anyway?
Yeah.
But I mean,
But
to
I
me,
mean,
It's not
this
gonna
will get-
happen,
this
Joe.
will get
to me,
checked
that
along
doesn't
the way.
require us bringing it back.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we just say, let's just not put anything under the oak?
Yeah.
So, you know
Right,
what I mean?
and the landscape plan actually gets sent out to our contract or engineering company, Wildan, and they have landscape architects on board. They're the ones who will go
Review.
over and really review this in detail, both the irrigation, water efficiency of the plants, and the planting plan as well.
Are you confident that they're completely up to date about sustainable
Oh,
planting?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
I think if we do decide we want to approve tonight, what we should do then is try to give clear direction to the applicant and the staff over the issues that we find aren't quite done.
Fair enough.
So if we want to talk about siding or basement, solar panels or whatever these things are, so that there's clear direction, so that the applicant can do it properly and the staff can check. What we don't want to do is sort of say, yeah, I got some issues with this thing, and then approve
Well,
it.
okay, fair enough, but I may be putting words in their mouths. I mean, they may want to speak to,
Yeah,
maybe
why
they'll
don't you-
bring it
why don't you
back.
come
I
up?
don't know. I mean,
I've pretty much been like almost 2 years on this project.
okay.
Tonight would be nice to get your blessings. We still have to go through structurals. We won't even start, we still have to do structurals, which is gonna take time. So, if, the basement is, to me, is kind of a mood issue because we're gonna do that anyway, because that's where all the utilities are going. As far as the siding goes, that's a pretty, we're gonna agree to that, maybe the next meeting or whatever, but my point is that I really wanna get started on my structurals.
Well,
And if it's just the siding or the landscape, we could, and we got a pretty, like 90% there, 99% there. If your blessing was good for the structurals and everything else is real easy to, we'll come back on the siding. We'll bring you samples of the siding.
Okay.
There's,
Then I'm
That's
yeah,
fine.
that.
I don't think the only structural question that it sounds like we have is whether you build the trellis out of steel, which probably isn't even that big of an issue for you because that's not
no,
load
it could be
bearing.
aluminum.
And the other issue is if you're really making the part that's solar ready, whether you put the panels on or not, you're going to build it the same. So it doesn't sound like we have any
Yeah, I don't
structural
think we have
issues.
any structural.
No, as a
far
matter,
as the
as a
shape.
matter of fact, I would like us all to say that the entire configuration is just frozen as of right now, and that any further action is going to be only about these
details.
okay? And
Landscape plans are easy.
time's up on the other one.
Yeah, that's good. So let's go over siding. Do we all agree we want flush?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's gonna be tomato. I strongly feel those large panels aren't serving you. They almost look like you did plaster and then you just put in your reveal lines, I mean, that's the size, 4x8, I know you can cut it down, but I would strongly suggest some sort of flush siding, at least on the east, wrapping around the garage and coming back in. And then if you want to do the large panels on the other part, fine. I would probably go with the plaster.
Your point with the windows and the siding, really, that's where you need the smooth plaster.
Yeah.
It just gets way too complicated
Is
with
that
all
is that something
siding.
that the other commissioners are good with?
I agree to that.
Yeah.
I think that's a very
There's so
smart.
little wall there that,
And the east side has plenty of wall, so you kind of articulate that. So if you could bring back what you're thinking on a flush siding, 8-inch, 10-inch, I don't know, whatever.
I mean,
Or
these-
if you maybe if you want to go vertical.
One
okay,
thing
whatever.
I've seen on some other buildings like this is where they'll have the larger panel and then a thinner one.
You can
And
do
then-
that too.
So that's, but I wanted
Random, they
to,
could call it random.
Yeah.
well,
No,
I'm
I'm
gonna,
just saying.
I
there's
want
a lot of
to
that.
I want to disagree with some people at the table here.
Good.
Okay, because I would like to not see, would like to not see any cement plaster, any stucco on this, because there are too many instances where you go around the corner and it's pretty evident that cement plaster was done just as a cost-cutting thing. And and cement plaster up above with that beautiful block down on the base it's totally inside out.
But on a wall that's
yeah.
full of sliding glass doors and windows, actually, I think it'll look too busy with all the lines, so I like a cleaner look.
Yeah, if you look at the plans too, where he's got a lot of re-entrant corners, he's got a lot of places where you can start and stop one material. It's not like it's one big rectangular box where you just pick your corner. You know, this has some good.
Well, not the lap.
So
The block thing too is like the straight lines. I'm doing a lot of that now. There's no more.
Well, for
get
this
away from the
style, I
brick
think.
pattern.
Yeah, no, but it's the style of the house.
It does very much so.
And you picked a good block. That's a very beautiful. The burnished block is gorgeous. So, I think it can be done because I do it all the time. where you have a really
I don't,
expensive
because I
siding.
don't.
Well, I don't know if you do or not, but
No, we do it all the time too.
where the stucco, where you have large windows, because you're trimming all that out, it becomes kind of a
busy.
mess.
It looks busy.
It looks busy. So I think
Yeah.
And this kind of a job, seriously, on that kind of siding, I don't bring in I don't bring in framers. I have finished carpenters that do that. That's what
you're
they
gonna need
do.
to.
So
if we can see what you're thinking there, as part when you come back, you know.
I'll just say, as long as it's not lap, I think it'll be fine, so.
And I trust you.
I got
mean,
it.
Where you guys have come, you're going to make a smart decision. So
Yeah.
just show us what you're thinking there on that.
The siding and the more information on the planting around are the only two things that I'm curious about. I'd like to see that resolved, and I think you'd probably like to see them resolved too, because it'll help you pencil out what you're doing.
yeah,
But I agree, the basic structure is,
And on the basement side, it's, if it's not changing look, I don't think we have issues.
If you want to
but-
see,
do
if
with
you
the
want to see a
outside.
plan of
Yeah,
what-
but if it's something you could do a plan, I think that would give me a little comfort. Or if you find that, stacking the equipment out needs to have one bulb out or something, let us know, and we can say if that's going to be an issue or not.
and I did make a mistake on the on his existing house, is that there's no roof on that patio. Part of it's gone, so I always thought there was no roof there. But there really is a roof over the patio
The front porch.
of the front
front
porch.
porch. Yeah.
I think there's only roof on the left side. On the right-hand side, I think it's.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that how you see it?
Yeah. So there's nothing on the right-hand side.
On the right-hand side, it's all like a trellis or something.
If it's a stick in our spokes over the square footage, then I would just totally eliminate that. You'll just see a trellis over the
I mean-
front of that whole.
I think it needs the look of having the front porch on the building. I think it's integral to how that building looks.
But could it be a trellis, like a
Yeah, yeah.
a slatted
Which
roof?
was what I was gonna say, that if it were, because I sort of read it that if we call that a front porch, we have to count it as square footage. But if it's more of a trellis thing that looks just like a front porch, then it's not
Very
a
easy to
front
do.
porch. And it would have exactly the same look as we have here with the same kind of beams and stuff, then I think it
Uh-huh.
would, as far as I'm concerned, I think that would handle
Yeah.
the situation and still preserve that cozy front porch.
I think given the ambiguity of our code about the fact that it was the primary structure and it was facing the street, and we're trying to preserve what's already there,
Right.
we probably have the latitude to say, and maybe
front porch.
council, please correct me if I'm wrong here, that we're not going to count that as square footage. So to me, I really think let's, and it's just a porch, right? I don't think anyone's going to have heartache over whether that porch is square footage or not when they drive by the building. So what's going to look the best? I think that's really the fundamental question, and I'm going to defer to more design experts.
I'm fine with that.
I think you guys can, I mean, like, if it needs a solid roof, then fine, it's open on all three sides, but if you kept the same profile and it was trellised, I think it would look just as beautiful. I mean, from the street, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was solid roofed or
Right.
open. And I think, you know.
I would keep a roof on it myself personally, but if it's square foot issue, that's 2 steps backwards to me, so I would do whatever you want.
Well,
I think you're caught in a kind of awkward position because it's now the front porch, but it won't be once you put the other building in, and there's some other things. So if you put a solid roof on it, in this case, I don't think it's. I wouldn't have a lot of heartburn over that. And it wouldn't be as. I think my concern would more be is if people are trying to game the system. And I don't think this is the case. I mean, I think you proceeded in good faith, and the fact that you are restoring the structure to its original historical conditions, I think counts more than us, maneuvering around whether it was the primary or the whatever,
So-
I agree with you
So
on that.
council,
Put a roof.
is that within our authority to say that based on our read, we determine this not to be square footage?
Yeah, I don't see why not. That ambiguity exists. I
Okay,
think
then let's, and do we have consensus on that?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
let
let's
it-
be
let it
clear.
go.
Especially because
Put the right roof on,
Yeah.
okay?
You got it.
And we're not counting it as square footage.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially because it's an old historic, an old building. It would be nice to restore it, so
And-
I take back what I said.
Yeah, and part of it is because you have been, you have worked so well with this commission that we don't have the sense of that we're getting gamed. Not every applicant gets such comfort, gives us comfort level. We've had a lot of people that have
I can imagine.
not been quite as,
Let's stop that.
Well, so is it pretty clear what we're getting back?
I think so, and are there any
Landscape.
other issues that we want, you want to see the block, or are you good with
No,
the
I'm
block?
good with the block, and I don't think that should even be a condition. It's a suggestion,
Okay,
which I think they'll take care of. But I think it's the siding, the landscape,
that's,
a
yeah.
basement plan.
basement plan,
Because it might be, I don't know where you're going to put the door. It'd be nice to know. Like, is it going to be on the east face or around the south?
Gotta be on
or-
the south side, because that way nobody sees it.
yeah, and that's also going to
Well,
be
then you
your
might have
highest
to
part.
carve out, you might have to put like a little retaining wall, like a pad where the door's going to go, because the slope's coming down, right? So there's going to be some,
Well, that actually, at that point, that actually by the time
Down.
you get to that door, it's gonna flatten out. pretty
okay,
much.
so
Yeah, you're
it might be
7
nice
feet
to see
there,
that.
yeah.
But I don't think it's going to structurally, you're not changing the
No.
footprint.
Yeah.
You're just working within that box. So why not see it?
On the block, there was a little discussion much earlier in the evening about infilling some more out underneath that porch. I think that absolutely we should not do that. You made the right move by holding it back and letting the building and the porch cantilever out, look like it was sliding out a little bit. I think that was, from a design standpoint, absolutely the correct thing to do, because as we're concerned about the height of that thing at that lowest corner, that you would not want a big honker right
Good.
down into the ground, that the fact that it kind of floats by is a much better visual solution.
And it's an
So-
overhang for the door.
Consider that frozen, all right?
Oh, right, yeah.
The door
Okay.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, hope that's clear as mud, but
Okay. Do you all have any other questions you feel like you want
No,
direction from
fine.
us?
Yeah. I would just like to once again say thank you for bringing us something nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
like,
Thank
you know, I come to sit down to start reading these reports sometimes, and it's like, oh, I don't want to read it because I know it's going to be something that I don't like. And today it was like, ooh, look at that. Yeah. So it's nice. And it was
right.
really a pleasure to,
One other thing I just want to confirm, we all agree that the front fence should be lost,
yeah.
right?
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
What that?
Yeah, please take out the fence,
Oh, yeah, that,
that
I
would-
would
that-
love to, like,
because that's, I think, just going to
Yeah.
impale
like,
deers
call
and
my metal
do.
guy, tell him, come get your fence.
Yeah, good.
And no fence is, actually, I'm sorry, but I just like the no fence thing.
Yeah, that's better.
That's fine.
It's
Yeah.
There's
fine.
so many other more creative things we could do than have a fence in front of all that.
Oh, yeah.
It's cleaner.
It doesn't go with that style at all.
It's not even about the money with the fence, it looks nicer without the fence, in my opinion.
Well, it's more, I personally think that without a fence, it's just more part of the community.
Yes.
It's more welcoming to the street to say we're part of this neighborhood, not we want to put up a fence and keep people out. So,
Yeah, and besides, if Howard's sculptures are gone,
yeah,
Why bother?
yeah.
yeah.
No,
It
they're
just
all
says
over
something
town.
different.
Everybody came and got some.
Good.
I wish I had. I loved walking by there. I'm just saying that, the fence was part of his
Yeah.
of his sculpture garden, and so if the sculpture isn't there, well, why worry about the fence?
Okay, do we want to continue this to a date certain, or are we going to renotice?
No, we want to continue it to a date certain. I want to ask the applicants, do you think you would be able to come back on October 18th?
With the, basically,
Landscape.
landscape,
Siding.
siding options.
What
or-
you're gonna
yeah,
do,
what I'm
yeah.
gonna
Little
do.
3D of
The
the,
basement.
of the basement.
Plan, yeah.
A plan of the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's doable. So basically a month from now, right?
Yeah.
That's doable.
That is with our blessing and agreement that they should get rolling with their
Yeah.
structural work,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
We're not changing the.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Promise, we won't change it next time.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay.
That work?
That works.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on that.
Yes.
Also move.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
No, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is- and your motion?
I made the
You
motion,
moved-
she
you
seconded.
moved it.
Yeah.
You moved, I seconded.
Okay, now we will move on to a second opportunity for audience participation. Seeing no audience, we will pass that. Moving on to planning commission reports. Anybody have anything?
I do.
Joe?
Okay, I have two items. One is that happy to report that the city council accepted our recommendation and did designate 500 Mariposa.
Great.
And I showed up at that council meeting and I spoke from the podium in support of it and also clarifying a couple of council's questions. But the applicant was there. They had a good presentation, and the council voted unanimously to designate. Happy about
Well,
that.
Thank you for representing us.
The other item that I want to note here is that at the city's little museum buildings, the Richardson House and Lizzie's Trail Inn, that the arrangement is that the city owns the buildings and the Historical Society operates and is responsible for the displays and so forth. There has been an issue for a very long time about the condition of the shed addition at the back of the Richardson House, and just want to mention that I have been working from the time that I was on the board of the Historical Society, been working on plans for the restoration of the shed, which is deteriorating badly from underneath because it's got too much woodwork dangling down in the dirt there. Those drawings are basically complete. Leslie Ziff, the president of the society, and I met recently with the city manager and the public works director about that. We discussed some of the issues of how we would go forward in terms of actually getting the work done, which isn't going to be by weekend warriors, okay? I think the upshot of the whole thing is that there's a lot of fundraising that's going to be needed. They kind of sent us out to go raise funds. All right, so at any rate, plans exist there. There's going to be a lot of fundraising involved, and but
Sounds good.
that's where
All right.
that stands.
Thanks.
Start making T-shirts. Save the shed.
Save the shed.
Yeah, but it's clearly going to take a lot more than selling. We should have shed T-shirts. Okay, I like that idea, but it's going to take a lot more than selling T-shirts and holding bake sales and things.
Where's that Kickstarter campaign?
There you go.
It really will take an effort. Will take thinking in terms of six figures to do it. The city and what they're obligated to as far as requirements, legal requirements, in terms of insurance, in terms of all of the work having to be done according to prevailing wage. Are you familiar with prevailing wage? Okay. You start adding it all up. It's a very, very steep road for the historical society and the city. So far, at least at the level of that first discussion, they weren't ready to start funding.
Right.
So there'll be fundraising. Maybe there'll be a future city budget that'll help it a little bit. I don't know, but anyway, that's where that project is right now.
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We'll turn it over to staff for a report.
Just wanted to point out that on the October 4th meeting, we will be reviewing our first CETT project.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what project?
One Carter.
One Carter.
I'm so sorry that I won't be here at that meeting.
We could maybe postpone it for you.
I will be in New York City.
Okay.
It's only 3-hour difference. You can call in.
I'll be busy.
That concludes my
And we
comments.
still have our joint meeting with the city council scheduled for the 23rd of October.
3rd.
Okay.
And then the November 1st meeting will be canceled.
November 1st?
Yes, November 1st.
Okay.
And then if we need to schedule a second meeting in November, if necessary, we do have, there's a third week in November here. On November 29th, we could hold a special meeting if need be. So we'll keep that
Back pocket.
kind of in the back pocket, yes.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Vincent, a while back you had begun to discuss with us some possible changes either to the preservation ordinance or some policies surrounding that. We had a little discussion, and you were planning to agendize that for a future date. Where does that stand, and is there anything we can do to move that forward?
I think that could be a possible discussion item. I think this is, talking to the city manager, it becomes more of a, I think it could become more of a staff decision than a policy decision where we could move forward with some of those cleanup elements. And when we were talking about the entitlement review, we were looking at the entitlement review flow chart. The commission provided input that the noticing should be consistent, possibly that we do notice boards across all applications, but for something like a second unit, we don't do mailed notices. That was my recollection, and just to try to simplify that aspect. The other issue was the discrepancy between the discretionary demolition permit ordinance, which allowed, if a historical resource report was prepared with mitigation measures, that we can move forward with a certificate of appropriateness, or we call it something else. And that would need to be a code amendment, I believe. And that way, we're avoiding that discrepancy with the historic preservation ordinance that talks about a certificate of appropriateness, which is meant for a designated property. The other one was for eligible properties.
So where does that all stand right now in terms of your operations?
Right now, I'm not bringing it forward as a certificate of appropriateness as it's eligible, and bringing it forward as a discretionary demolition permit. and then applying whether it be a design review permit that goes before the commission or an administrative design review, as long as I have mitigation.
But Joe, I think to the extent we want to do code amendments that are more than just cleanup in this area is really something we're hoping to talk over with the city council at our joint meeting and get better direction. Because I think
Right.
once we get sort of more policy direction, then we can go and run with the code amendments. So we really need, in that area, other than just cleanup stuff and noticing, we really need to get on the same page with the council on where we're going to go.
Okay, that's fine. One thing that I've had on my mind about that, it's an issue that we had broached back then, and that was that, and that has to do with historic resource evaluations that are produced for a particular property. And we had some discussion about, well, what happens? How do we interpret these things? I'm thinking that perhaps we should have some guidelines that we give to we give to the applicant and the author beforehand, so we do identify for them ahead of time, like you've got to answer this and you've got to answer that.
Couldn't that be an administrative thing? That sort of.
I think this is
checklist
more of a
kind of thing?
policy decision.
Yeah, I don't know where it
Yeah.
falls.
It doesn't need
okay.
code or something,
And,
but.
and this would be one of the topics that we will be addressing at the joint study session with the city council on October 23rd, and figuring out what the path forward is.
Right.
Yeah, I think that if we're able to define, and I agree, it's just a policy thing. Okay, we would be able to, in the steps pursuant to that report, that we would eliminate an awful lot of confusion if we had certain kinds of requirements. I see a lot of these reports being done where academically they don't really hit on all the points, even the legal points that they should, and that's number one. And number two, I mean, a lot of them are pretty bad with respect to CEQA requirements, and the other thing is they still leave us guessing about what turn out to be some pretty key items when we actually get down to discussion. So pursuant to those things, so I think that we could noodle some policy here about what we expect to see in terms of format and questions to be answered in the course of researching a historic resources report that would really help us a lot once we get here.
Right, and I would agree with you. I do ask for them, some of the historic reports, if they don't have it already, to address the CEQA clearance issue. And then if the report comes back as eligible, to go back and, if they have a project already in mind, to be able to evaluate, to provide mitigation measures. But many times we don't have a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Real quickly, for instance, you get people who really don't even know the city, who just because they dredged up some information about the person who built the building or who lived in it in the past, they're talking about the historic value, and they're almost saying that well, an important person lived here just because I found them in an old newspaper, kind of thing. And
so that would be another issue, whether or not we want to continue to address the cultural significance in this case, or just concentrate on the architecture.
Right.
yeah, you know, it really when I write these for use in other cities, I'm very, very well aware of the fact that the community itself really knows best about the importance of a particular person. The fact that you find information doesn't really prove much at all.
Right.
So anyway, there are a lot of issues like that, and maybe I should just ramp up my own thinking about it and then.
Well, I think one of the
Share
things
them.
that we're going to need to do before our meeting with the city council is we've got a ton of issues, is winnow them down and really try to get the most important issues, because we're not going to have enough time to cover everything, especially in detail. So
Right.
we need to think about those things and
Right.
really try to use that time wisely.
Right now, we're really looking at concentrating on the Historic Resources Survey, Mills Act, addressing some of the Mills Act issues that we're having. And soft first story and reinforced masonry buildings is another issue that I think is important to begin deeper conversations with the council on and get direction.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay.
Well, with that, I will adjourn the meeting and we will reconvene on October 4th.